Happy Halloween! I hope you're all having a very spooky Saturday, because today, if we stick to our release schedule, is October 31st! I figured I'd get all dolled up for the occasion, because today we're discussing a franchise incredibly dear to my heart, Jurassic Park. More specifically, we're here to discuss the Netflix original series Camp Cretaceous, which came out this past September 2020, and not a lot of people that I know have actually watched this one yet, which I think is a real shame because, as you're about to see, I think it's pretty spectacular. When it comes to Jurassic Park, my love for this franchise runs deep. We're talking some of my earliest childhood memories. I grew up, like practically every child ever, absolutely loving dinosaurs. I was obsessed as a kid. When my cousin first told me about Jurassic Park at age 4, I became enraptured with the idea of dinosaurs walking the earth in the modern day. She showed me the Sega Genesis game and I became absolutely hooked. I practically begged my parents to let me go see it. Instead, deciding that my 4-year-old sensibilities were far too underdeveloped and delicate for such an intense movie-going experience, they bought me the storybook for my 5th birthday. A birthday party which, incidentally, was Jurassic Park themed. We played Pin the Claw on the Raptor, my mom made a dinosaur birthday cake, my dad brought home this sort of cardboard display piece for the movie that he got from his work. It was like a motion-activated door that swung open and the T-Rex would roar at you. It was awesome. Best birthday ever. That Christmas, they bought me the making of book, and when they finally found the VHS at the local library, my mom let me watch the making of documentary featuring the one and only James Earl Jones.
Steven Spielberg wished to show us not movie monsters, but the animals themselves as they might have been. Immense and beautiful living beings that were once lords of the earth.
The book even had some storyboards in the back, which was a wonderful treat for a budding cinephile like myself. And it's key that my parents let me watch the documentary before actually getting to see the movie. I watched in awe as the movie magic came to life. The creatures became reality before my eyes, whether digitally or claymation or the huge animatronic reconstructions they had on set. This was, in my opinion, some top-notch parenting, because when I actually did get to see the film, my little 8-year-old brain was able to process the horror in front of me through the lens of movie-making magic. It's the sequence of events that led up to me actually seeing Jurassic Park that I blame for my love of cinema and the making of such cinematic masterpieces. In 1997, my dad, brother, and I took a trip into the city to actually see The Lost World in theaters, which was a sort of formulative moment for me. It's one of the first times I can remember actually going to a movie theater. As an adult, I finally got around to listening to the audiobook of the original Michael Crichton novel, and if you're a Jurassic Park fan and haven't read or listened to this book, do so as soon as possible. I pray for the day that they eventually reboot it as a made-for-TV limited, like 8 to 10 episode miniseries on HBO and Showtime or something like that. I'm such a dinosaur fanatic that when I got married a couple years back, my wedding band actually had T-Rex bone ground up inside of it. Leftover fossils, not like one they stole from a museum or something. If you couldn't tell by now, I absolutely love Jurassic Park. And yet, like so many franchises that have been allowed to go on for too long, my love for it started to wane as the movies went on and on. Sure, the first one's a masterpiece, and I do still hold that the second one is far underrated. But by the time the third one came around, the series had sort of devolved into a sort of monster movie schlock that the original film stood in defiance against.
But if the movie is honorable and can get people to say, gee, this is the first time I've really seen a dinosaur. This isn't Gorgo, this isn't Godzilla.
Spielberg specifically was trying to defy the audience's expectation of this as a monster movie and instead wanted to portray these animals for what they were. Animals. When the smash blockbuster hit Jurassic World came out, I absolutely hated it. The first trailer was okay, but when I actually saw the movie, I found it to be overly long, incredibly dull, misogynistic crap. If the third film had teased with the idea of being a monster movie, Jurassic World dove headfirst into it with a Mosasaurus-sized belly flop. I hated it so much that when the sequel came out a couple years later, I didn't even bother, and I doubt I'll see the third one, despite them teasing the return of Grant, Ellie, and Malcolm. In spite of all my hatred for Jurassic World, however, when the Netflix original Camp Cretaceous got announced, it caught my attention. I don't know if it was the first teaser images that really stood out to me, or the return to that red and orange color scheme, but I think what really grabbed me by the gills was the similarity in premise to another little-known piece of Jurassic media, Jurassic Park: The Game. This admittedly poorly named title from Telltale Games was a wonderful release in 2011 that I think could have been a lot better had they worked out their sort of gameplay loop at that time.
The boat's leaving any minute now.
It chronicles the adventures of various peripheral characters existing just off screen, from a park veterinarian and his daughter, to the mercenary hired by Nedry's employers as a plan B, to the InGen security team sent to evacuate any remaining personnel off the island. The premise of this game, if you haven't figured it out yet, is very similar to the premise of Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. 6 teenage campers on the far side of Isla Nublar have to fight and survive as the events of Jurassic World the film take place all around them. I was very interested to see if this series and its captivating premise could salvage anything from the giant pile of dinosaur dung that was Jurassic World.
That is one big pile of shit.
I am pleased to report that it succeeded in almost every way. I don't want to spoil too much for this review, just enough to convince you to watch it, because I really do think it's worth your time. If you're a fan of the Jurassic Park franchise, you'll be a fan of this show. And if you've never seen Jurassic World, honestly, you're better off just ignoring it and watching this. There's a couple points where they cross over, a few characters have a cameo here and there, including the ever-infamous Dr. Wu.
Venus, Dr. Wu! You done f***ed up now!
But apart from a few references to the original film, the show exists largely within its own continuity. Camp Cretaceous, as I mentioned, is centered around 6 adolescent campers and their 2 absolutely incompetent and irresponsible camp counselors. There's Darius, the every kid dino nerd who won the Jurassic Park equivalent of a golden ticket to get there. There's Brooklyn, the social media superstar who's there by invitation to give positive press to her vast army of followers. There's Yaz, a young athlete whose career has been sponsored by Jurassic World. There's Ben, the neat freak, cowardly, nerdy kid whose affluent parents pressured him into attending to try and force him to face his anxiety issues.
Sanitizer. Gotta be ready for anything. The world is a grab bag of gross.
There's Kenji, the quintessential spoiled rich kid enema bag whose parents own stock in and built several condos on the island. And there's Sammy, who... Actually, I don't really remember how she got on the island.
Kapow! Pow, pow. Oh, also my family supplies all the beef for the park, and that's how I got here.
No wonder she's the least interesting character. The first 3 episodes introduce us to this lovable bunch, and we get to know their quirks. As the events of the film start to cross paths with their stories, the show finds ways to both lean into and buck the various tropes applied to their characters. For instance, when I found out that Brooklyn was being set up as an over-the-top web personality, I immediately rolled my eyes and thought, oh god, here comes another boomer-written take on the youths. And there is some of that cringe, sure.
Like and subscribe to join me as I unbox Jurassic World.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
But what I expected going in was what we usually get with characters like this. A snobbish, aloof, mean girl type who was only nice to people when she was on camera. Instead, what we got was a kind, spunky, inquisitive character with a Nancy Drew-esque penchant for snooping around for the truth. A person who genuinely cares about her friends and has real anxiety about the way she's being perceived online. Which I think is something that a lot of public figures really struggle with to this day. Brooklyn ended up being my favorite character. The same is true for each of these kids. Sure, they appear on the surface to be mere stereotypes, but much like one of my other favorite Netflix originals, Stranger Things, the show works overtime to twist your expectations and subvert the tropes that try so hard to define them. Except maybe Kenji. He's basically an asshole for the first 6 episodes, but even he becomes more likable when the group needs his knowledge of the island to save all of their lives, and he basically cracks like an egg under the pressure. But it's not just the characters that shine here. The dinosaurs are fantastic as well. From a newborn ankylosaurus to a cavalcade of beautiful herbivores to the more villainous raptors, each is given the awe and weight they deserve. The show's nemesis, Toro the Carnotaurus, acts as a sort of T-Rex Jr. for the kids, hounding them at every turn, bearing a well-deserved grudge for a few characters in particular. They're also quite well rendered for the most part. A couple of them hitch here and there, but I couldn't quite figure out if that was an accidental limitation of the effects budget or a deliberate reference to the Go Motion prototypes that were actually featured in Jurassic Park before they implemented the CG. The only real exception here, in my mind, is the Indominus Rex. Now, I know they had to include the I-Rex. It's the one everybody knows from Jurassic World. The kids are gonna be expecting it. And maybe it is my hatred of the I-Rex for turning this thoughtful take on dinosaurs into a bog-standard monster movie, or my hatred of Jurassic World in general, but I found the use of the I-Rex to be incredibly overdone. In the original film, it already felt like the I-Rex could teleport across this huge island whenever the dumbass director thought it was time for a scary moment. Adding in several encounters with these kids only serves to muddy the waters. I'd have been more than happy with just the zipline sequence in episode 4. The several other scenes we get with the I-Rex could have easily had a different dinosaur in its place. In fact, I recently found out through my research that 2 of the extra I-Rex scenes instead were supposed to feature Toro the Carnotaurus, which would have given that dinosaur so much more impact in the overall arc of the series. Those are also the scenes where the I-Rex is the most janky looking, which is why I wonder if this was a last-minute change. By the 3rd or 4th time the I-Rex showed up, I just was slumping my shoulders and saying, again? Are we seriously doing this again? But enough about the I-Rex. The less said about it, the better. The rest of the creatures on the show are fantastic. The sheer volume of cool, scary, adorable, interesting creatures here is indescribable. We even get a couple that we only briefly see in the films, or we don't see at all. While this is definitely a kid's show, I wouldn't let that put you off if you're an adult. There's something here for everybody, and the show doesn't pull its punches. Well, okay, maybe it does pull its punches, but it still punches a lot. People die in this show, in front of children. I wouldn't recommend showing this to some younger children. It is quite scary at times, even for an adult. I mean, I am kind of a wimp when it comes to that sort of thing, but I'm sure there's others like me. Regardless of your age group, though, there's truly something here for everyone. Now, that's all I really want to say about the show, because I really want you to be able to experience this for yourself. It's a truly worthy entry into the Jurassic Park franchise, perhaps the first we've had in 20 years. I give this season 5 scared teenagers out of 6, and I cannot wait for season 2. Thank you all for joining me. If you'd like to leave a comment to let me know what you thought of the show or what you hope from the next season, please go ahead and do so. I'm Hammy, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Happy Halloween!
You want to consult here or in my bungalow?
So that's what toxic masculinity looks like.